Ma'at. Ma'at. Ma'at is the goddess of truth and the balance. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul of the deceased is paraded into a hall where their heart is weighed against a feather. And this feather is the feather of Ma'at. Feather of Ma'at is an ostrich feather, which, as I understand it, is the equivalent of the Egyptian letter A. And the idea is that the soul is being weighed against this fulcrum, if you will. And it is a means of essentially discerning value or quality. And if you think about it, what impact an instrument like the scales would have had on the ancient world, it's rather extraordinary. So in a world with relatively little technology, devices like scales, which are high precision instruments for performing basically for performing delicate tasks, they're going to have a huge impact on the society, not just in terms of what they enable us to do, but also of what they enable us to think. So, for example, when you introduce a new technology into the society, that technology opens up new pathways of action, but also new pathways of thought. And so thought then can use the technology as a kind of a metaphorical basis to explore other options. And in this case, what we have is a mapping of the source domain, if you will, of the scales onto the target domain, which is ethics. Now, I just used some phraseology from cognitive linguistics, which talks about mental spaces and using metaphors to carry inferential content from one domain to another. And I don't want to dwell too hard on that, but I did mention, I have mentioned Lakoff, George Lakoff, several times already. So I just want to mention his name again. Right. So you have this concept of the weighing of the heart. And the weighing of the heart is basically to determine its quality. And so this is a heuristic, in other words, a means of a kind of a thought experiment, if you will, or a means of determining what it means to be balanced, to be living the good life. And so within this idea, the concept of the Ma'at, and notice I say the Ma'at. The Ma'at is almost conceived of as a continuum, like the Dharma. And so within the context of the Ma'at, whether the heart is balanced or not is a question of whether it can answer certain questions about how it is behaved in relation to other people. So there are then negative judgments of Ma'at, which are statements such as, I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not coveted or adulterized, or any number of these things that are corrosive to the bonds of the society, right? Justice is a concept that holds a society together. The idea that there is a guarantee that everybody will be protected and that fairness will essentially reign throughout the kingdom. That's what the idea of justice is fairness, and the idea of a fair court to which we are essentially able to appeal. And so this is an idea that court exists in the afterlife. The soul is weighed on the basis of how they can answer those questions. So when you say, I have not killed, is that truthful or false? In other words, will the scale register that as a merit or a demerit? And then in the end of the day, one could assume that the heart or the feather itself is a kind of a standard, is a standard of justice and harmonia, to which, if you're able to make these statements and able to pass through this test, then you will qualify as a just individual, an innocent person. And the other way to look at it is that this is a gate through questions of ethics into the afterlife. And of course, they had a beast that called Ammit that would devour the unworthy souls. Meanwhile, Thoth is the consort, or the male component of the male side of Ammit. So Thoth and Matter have a relationship to one another. So Thoth is dragging this all down, and if the soul passes the test of Ma'at, it'll pass on into the Hall of the Gods. If not, it will be torn apart, dissolved into its elements. And so, in a sense, this shows, I think, that ethics is less about following a moral code, but more about coherence. So, in the tremendously important philosophical text, The Ethics by Spinoza, there is a demonstration that ethics, unlike morals, is derived directly from the structure of reality. And so the degree to which we behave ethically is the degree to which we are fundamentally in harmonia with the structure of existence itself. And so ethics becomes about connection. We see the same metaphor of the scales appear in the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the earliest Kabbalistic text. And the statement is that the three mother letters, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, form a set of scales. So in the Sefer Yetzirah, unlike in the contemporary Hermetic tradition, Mem, or the root of water, is here in Chokhmah. So this whole pillar is seen as watery. And Shin is here in Bina. So this is the pillar of mercy, the pillar of severity. So this is merit, and this is demerit. And this is the fulcrum, if you will, this pillar of mildness or resolution. And so the idea is that Mem is the pan of merit, and Shin is the pan of demerit, and then Aleph is the tongue of the balance, which I think is very interesting, because pan is also very close to the word hand. I believe it is kaf is pan in Hebrew, and kaf is also palm of the hand. So you have these two hands, and then the tongue of the balance, which is the marker that shows which side a given object falls on, right? And if it's right in the middle, of course, you have two equal weights. But of course, the pun is that it's also the tongue of the mouth. So speech has an effect on the scales, right? And this is a very Kabbalistic, very Hebrew idea that the words we say are part of the covenant that bridge these two parts of our being. So in the Sefer Yetzirah, as well as in the Egyptian mythology, there is this idea of rectification, of finding the balance. And so this week, we're studying justice. We're studying this issue of the balance. And of course, the card itself has some interesting variation from deck to deck. So if you know your tarot history, you know that the Visconti decks are unnumbered, but when the Marseille decks emerge, so with the aid of the printing press, these become more popular tarots. They have numbers, and the number of justice is 8. Sorry, is 11 in It is 8 in the Marseille deck. I got ahead of myself there. All right, it's 8 in the Marseille deck. It's not 8 in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which is the mode we're using now for this course. We are assuming Justice to be 11. And so you will find that there are 2 main traditions or more, but really we're talking 2 traditions. The Thoth tradition runs with the Marseille but does something interesting. We've talked about this in other contexts, particularly when we work with the star, but I'll say a little bit about it now. When the Kabbalah was mapped onto the tarot, the Fool was placed at the beginning next to Aleph, and then the letters were played out. So Aleph the Fool, Bet the Magician, Gimel the Priestess, Daleth the Empress, and it all made sense because these letters already had astrological attributions and philosophical attributions that had come to them from the Sefer Yetzirah, which really articulates the letters. And so what the Golden Dawn, and particularly I think it was the Golden Dawn, finally worked out this arrangement. But what they realized is that if you are attributing the letters in linear order, parallel to the numbers of the tarot, you get remarkable correspondences. And it is, Aries corresponds to the Emperor, which makes sense. Taurus corresponds to the Hierophant. Gemini corresponds to the Lovers. All of this makes a great deal of sense until you get to number 8. And so number 8 would normally, if you are going on the one hand, on the one scale, you are going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down to 21, as you would with the tarot trumps. And on the other scale, you're going Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daleth. What you'll end up with is at 8, you'll end up with Tet, which means serpent in the Hebrew alphabet. And you will end up with, in the Marseille deck, the Justice. Okay, so you have the serpent, and this is already applied to Leo. So you've got Leo and Justice. Okay, that's a little odd. That doesn't entirely work. And then if you keep this parallel going, you will go 9, you get the Hermit and Yod, 10, the Wheel and Kaf, and then 11, you will, in the Marseille, get Strength, but it'll be assigned to Lamed, which is Libra. So, interesting. So for this reason, I believe Mathers, possibly, certainly Waite, switched these around and switched the correspondences so that we have Justice as 11 and Strength as 8. And what's really interesting is that people look at the Rider-Waite and they think, oh, this is traditional tarot. Rider-Waite is not traditional tarot. If there was a break with traditional tarot in the 20th century, it was the Rider-Waite. But this move, I think, has a lot of elegance. As most people know, I started with the Thoth deck, and I still very much admire the Thoth deck. But this structural move, I think, is, to me, what it unlocks is of greater value than what is unlocked by the alternative. And so the alternative, of course, is the Marseille and the Thoth. And Crowley was very, very aware of this switch that Waite had made. And Crowley heaped scorn on Waite, continuously heaps scorn on Waite, to the point where you can sometimes hear people who have aligned themselves with Aleister Crowley or Thelema, as understood through the lens of Aleister Crowley. They really disrespect Waite. There's this kind of polemic going on we got to step back from that polemic and see with fresh eyes what's going on. Waite was clearly a pretty erudite dude, and for all his faults, he had some pretty major merits, as did Crowley. Everyone's flawed, and everyone, we hope, has jewels to offer. Certainly in the case of both Crowley and Waite, there are jewels. And so I think the real jewel in Waite is this, giving us this 11 as justice, 8 as strength. Because, and we'll see more when we get to strength, because it gives us a great deal to work with. It puts justice and the wheel directly at the center of the tarot. And if you know the concept of truing, truing a wheel would mean to balance it so that it spins with maximum efficiency on the axle. Truing an arrow is getting it straight enough and balanced enough so it flies with accuracy. So if you put justice or the balance in the center of the tarot, you have this concept of truing. And that's really what's happening when you go through this path. As you know, having watched my other videos, having taken my course, that I am interested in pairing up the cards. So Aleph with Ta, Bet with Shin, Gimel with Resh, and so on. And getting this set of 11 pairs. These are the Athbash pairs, Aleph, Ta, Bet, Shin. Athbash being a very common Kabbalistic maneuver. But I didn't even know about it when I made this original discovery, but I discovered after the fact, oh, that's all it is Athbash. Okay, cool. I've even taken the time to draw images for the pairs. So here we have the Fool and the Universe. Here we have the Magician and the Judgment, and so on, and all the way down to the Justice and the Wheel. So this is the Feather of Ma'at within a toroidal kind of flow system. I have this example of a toroidal flow system. And so this is the visual I get at the center of the tarot, is that we are talking about a system that circulates energy through a kind of an integral field. And this is why, one of the reasons why I'd like to place Justice or Ma'at at the center of it. Ma'at is an interesting goddess. I was told once that of all the Egyptian goddesses, she didn't have her own temple, but she appeared in all the temples. Once at the entrance, once at the exit. So you have this double appearance of Ma'at, which is very much like the double appearance of the number 1, right? 1 and 1, or 11. If you pair, if you give Justice the quality of 11, then there are some interesting gematries you can do. You can look at the 11th path, which is the Fool, and you can say, okay, so Justice, or Lamed, is paired with the Fool, or Aleph, and Aleph is the ox, it means ox, and Lamed means ox goad. And so you get this word Al. And this is a big deal in the Thelemic world, because Frater Akkad, Charles Stanfield Jones, was a one-time disciple of Crowley's, found geometric keys within the channeled book, the Book of the Law, that totaled to 31, and to the point where he called it Liber Al Vel Legis, or Liber Book of the Law, or the Liberal Law, if you want, Liber Al. And of course Al Eister. But more interestingly, Al is El, which is one of the 2 key holy names that is ascribed to the Shem HaMepharash. So the Shem HaMepharash is these 3-letter names, 72 of them, and to each of these 3-letter names, to create an angel, to designate an angel, the word Al or the word Yah is appended to create a 5-letter name. So Al or El is this crucial holy name. And if we take Aleph and Lamed in the case of the tarot, and we add up the totals, Aleph and Lamed is 0 and 11, so we get 11. So there's this real nice kind of symmetry there. With the Athbash pairs, as I pointed out, when Aleph is paired with Tau, the total is 21. When Bet is paired with Shin, the total is 21. And all the way through, in the weight arrangement, and this, believe it or not, is what convinced me to choose Waite's arrangement over Crowley's, is this pairing will always, this pairing of Athbash letters will always result in a total of 21. If justice is 11 and strength is 8. If those two are swapped, then you will have at the middle of this structure a number of pairs that do not total 21. Why do I want them to total 21? Well, 21 is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, which enables us to see it as an extension of the pentagram, or sorry, the hexagram, the Majan star, as well as it gives us this idea that 0 and 21, the Fool in the World, is the archetypal encounter, and that all of the other encounters are shades of this kind of originary encounter of openness with manifestation. Aleph with Ta. And Aleph and Ta is Eth, which means essence. So it's a very strong argument, I think, for holding these together. If you have been in my course and followed my work and are privy to the discussion in the group that supports this class, you will also know that by taking these 11 pairs and calculating the difference, between Resh and Shin, or 1, Resh and Shin, Bet and Shin, so the Magician and Judgment. Bet and Shin is Magician 1 and Shin 20. The difference is 19, so we get 19. So we're jumping from one pair to another. And then, 19, and then its polar opposite is it's the sun. The polar opposite is the High Priestess, which is 2. So 19 minus 2 is 17. That's the star of the Emperor. And it precedes you through a series or a circuit of cards. But there's more than one circuit. That's what's very, very interesting. The ripple field, which is my name for this set of 11 concentric bands that we can use to map the tarot onto the labyrinth, believe it or not. The ripple field gives us a different type of quality. There are 11, or rather 22 paths, but there are 4 types. And these are circuits that I refer to as the domain circuit, the flow circuit, the trial circuit, and the art circuit. And this is quite a technical, aspect to this particular way of approaching tarot. But it enables us to mount the tarot trumps onto the wheel. If you have done any study into traditional Kabbalah, you know that sometimes the diagrams are concentric circles. These are called igulim, and sometimes they are vertical axes, like trees. These are called yosha. And we all know that the tree of life is a vertical axis. So the tarot is usually seen as a vertical axis, but we can also put it into a wheel format. And the way to do this is to in my finding, mount it on the Chartres labyrinth. And so you have 11 bands going in and 11 bands coming out. And I've developed a practice that I'm teaching to students in my course. It's a walking practice. It's a meditation that allows us to be aware of which path we're on as we walk into the labyrinth and out of the labyrinth. The labyrinth is a very, very profound meditation. It's a walking meditation. I highly recommend you find a labyrinth this week and walk it. They're not hard to find, actually. In most cities, you'll be able to find them. There's even like you look online, you can find the labyrinth locator. It'll show you where there's labyrinths near you. Find an 11th Circuit Chartres labyrinth. If you're in France, go to Chartres on Friday. That's when they clear the pews and you can walk it. But we can use this as a Igul diagram of the tarot. And what's fascinating about it is you will walk in it, and it's almost as if you can see this as the top half of a torus. The center of the labyrinth is the hole, and we're entering through this kind of top hemisphere with 11 bands. And when we're in the center, depending on what you encounter in the level of gnosis you've cultivated, you may have a profound experience. When you exit the labyrinth, consider that you have passed through the center and that you're actually walking out in another universe, in a universe that is changed by your having found that center. And so in this respect, you can really see two labyrinths kind of glued to one another or joined to one another in a toroidal fashion with a hole in the center. And this is a profound practice. It's not totally easy to do this. You can't just phone it in. You have to be really present. So I will teach you guys in another video this week how to perform the labyrinth walk in such a way that it marries itself to the tarot and the ripple field. And you can practice this, whenever you get a chance to. The thing I want to say, so of course we have entered in through these various different bands, and we're doing the tarot in order. The previous path, so the path of the hangman, represented a kind of a density field, a density wall, through which we passed through this kind of inversion, this Odin style sacrificial inversion on the tree. And now we're right in the center, or right around the center, because it's possible to conceive that there is, I won't call it a 23rd path, because I actually know, although in my tarot that I developed in 2005, I have a 23rd trump. There are other tarots with 23rd trumps. I know the Fountain Tarot has one, which is interesting, this fountain. And I know that the New Orleans Voodoo Tarot has one as well. And I developed one, which is, let's see if I can find it. Well, here's my version of the balance, justice, which I'm now tending to call ethics. Some people call it different things, right? It's called justice, it's called adjustment, the balance. I like to call it ethics. This guy, Key Infinity, that's the juggler. And, okay, it works, but I consider not putting an image on this, because restraint is a virtue. I think that one of the things I find about Hebrew Kabbalah is it has a restraint. There's certain things, comparing it to, say, Greek, comparing the Hebrew to the Greek, there's a restraint. There is a holding back from putting symbols on, say, the breath sounds. Although there are symbols, but they're kept back. They're not letters. They're diacritical marks. Whereas in Greek, the vowels are letters. And it seems to be the case that, so whenever you there's always an implicit +1 to any set, right? So if I have 5 elements, there's an implicit +1. I can make that explicit, but then I have 6 elements with an implicit 7th. And then I have 8 elements with an implicit 9th, and so on. So holding back, being in one kind of dimension, in other words, a set of things, say 11, and choosing not to make the hidden unity, which is always implicit, that lets us stay in this 11-dimensional space. Similarly, with 22 trumps, by not symbolizing the 23rd interval, we are holding space with this sense of awareness, and then these 22 elements that converge into the awareness. The awareness itself is not made explicit, which allows us to conceive of this hole at the center of the tarot, which I call the grotto. And in my experiences, the grotto is larger than the tarot itself. So to go into the grotto, we have to find our way through this process of truing. To get to the heart, to be allowed into this sacred space, I can talk about it, but to experience it is really to commensurate ourselves ethically, spiritually, to give ourselves full commitment to discovering the mystery at the heart of tarot, which is not in any one of the cards. If there can be any card to be ascribed there, it might be the backs, which usually in the more esoteric decks have a glyph of synthesis. So, who is justice? Who is the balance? Who is Maat? She's the guardian of the holy. She's the guardian. Balance and ethics is the guardian of the holy, of the whole, of the passage through and into this immanent experience, this portal at the heart of the labyrinth. Like a hagstone, for those of you who enjoy such things. This is this coral. I like it. It's triple hagstone. Not really a stone, but so what do we do to really study this path? We in a sense subject ourselves to judgment, to the judgment of the fair court, and allowing ourselves to be weighed so that we can gain feedback. And the mark of a person who is vulnerable to the feedback created by this Maatian engagement is a person who is able to evolve, is able to move and course correct. I think placing strength in the center produces a different kind of tarot. Perhaps it's a less neutral tarot. I think it's fair to say that the Rider-Waite has a kind of neutral energy. It just sort of sits there. Whereas, say, the Crowley-Thoth has a very non-neutral energy. It's very, very assertive and very radiant, or possibly radioactive. I think that this idea of truing, of balancing, of clearing that we get by putting justice at the center is valuable, not just because of the ripple field and the things that allows, but just as a general heuristic for how to pursue spiritual work. So that clearly the Maatian angle is the angle I've chosen. Ma'at is present in the Thelemic cosmology. Crowley wrote about it. He wrote about it in The Vision in the Voice, Liber 418, in which he has an experience of this lion devouring civilizations, which is the Aeon of Horus. And then way out in the background is this armored figure of justice. And he says, oh, that's the Aeon of Ma'at. It's coming, but don't worry, it's 2,000 years in the future. Well, what has happened since then? And one of the things that's happened is the leonine devouring of the linearity of time as we understand it. There has been within Thelema a Ma'atian current has emerged. Charles Stanfield Jones was one of the first people to ground it. He declared the Aeon of Ma'at. And I believe someone named Frater Valerian, who I have not read, but also grounded the Aeon of Ma'at within the Thelemic paradigm, right, which is about these aeons. And the idea that, hold on, Crowley said it's the Aeon of Horus, the Aeon of war and vengeance and the crowned and conquering child. These guys are saying, oh wait, we found the way out. We found an exit point. We can actually say it's the Aeon of Ma'at. And then, of course, there's Nema. So if you are versant with the Crowleyan Thelemic paradigm, you will, of course, know Liber Alvel Legis. There is a book called Liber Pennae Penumbra, which was channeled by Margaret Ingalls, or Mima. Mima is quite brilliant. She passed away a few years ago, but I highly recommend exploring her work. It's very, very, very refreshing. The Horus Ma'at Lodge, which she helped found, was influenced by Thelemic, chaos magic, and pagan practitioners, and is filled with very original and erudite magi. The Liber Pennae Penumbra, the Book of the Foreshadowing of the Feather, introduces the idea of this double current. That there is a Ma'atian current moving backwards in time and a Horus current moving forwards in time. So what the Horus current releases, the Ma'atian current balances. I initially had my Ma'atian kind of conversion, if you want to call it that, prior to knowing about Nema or any of that. And it was related to Frater Akat, who I felt that I was in communication with. In any event, so my sense is that this double current is reflected in the Athbash pairing, right? So you have an energy moving, as we climb up the tree from Tau to Aleph, there's an energy moving from Aleph down to Tau, and they cross right here at the center. In the center two paths, these energies will cross. So basically, by completing these first 11 paths, we're in a way meeting ourselves, moving backwards from the future. And so there's a diachronic and an anti-diachronic flow. This is very Philip K. Dickian. If you've read anything of Philip K. Dick, particularly his exegesis, he's talking about streams of time moving forwards, moving backwards, also orthogonal structures imposed upon the stream of time. Very, very prescient, very, very interesting stuff. But for the sake of this discussion, here at this kind of pivot or fulcrum or portal into the grotto, the place of truing, we're allowing ourselves to be trimmed down to the balance, like being put on a lathe. I'm thinking of Ursula Le Guin's fascinating story, The Lathe of Heaven. And there is something lathe-like about being shaped by ethics, by the judgment. As I mentioned before, the philosopher Spinoza wrote about ethics in contradistinction to morals. Ethics as an emergent set of behaviors that comes out of the structure of the universe itself, rather than a set of imposed values. And I think it's quite worth considering that, and I highly recommend the ethics. So I'd like to talk about here, just to drop a few more things that I didn't mention. there is this character Harumachus in the Thelemic cosmology, who is part of the Aeon to come and represent the double-wanded one. And one can see this 11 and Justice as being the double-wanded one. Ma'at holding these two wands. Of course, we also see a double-wanded one, a double-wanded woman, sometimes seen as Sophia, appearing in the world. The double-wanded one. So Ma'at is the double-wanded one, or Harumachus. I think is interesting. And let's just take a moment to talk about what Crowley did. So Crowley kept the Marseille numbering, right? He kept strength as 11, and he renamed it Lust. And he had Justice as 8 and renamed it Adjustment. So you've got this lovely image of Mott. I absolutely love this, and if you're familiar with the twin star as I've taught it, this is a shape of the diamond door. Very interesting. But Crowley knew about the weight switch, and he knew it made sense, but he didn't want to concede it. And so instead of flipping the cards like that, he went over to the other side of the zodiac, and I think we talked about this in the star, and he flipped the Emperor and he flipped He and Sadi, the Emperor and the Star, respectively. He flipped their letters, not the numbers, the letters. So I think I said this before. To solve the problem, he was basically saying, okay, I'm counterbalancing it. I'm putting this twist on the other side of the zodiac, thereby creating a Mobius loop, so it's balanced again. But I think it's like, I personally think that flipping the letters as opposed to the numbers is a bit like, oh, I've only got one glove. So in order to re-achieve balance, I'm going to put a shoe on my right. You know, I've got a glove on my left hand. I'll put a shoe on my right foot. That's because he's dealing with the letters. Now, the interesting thing is letters are an Athbash pair, so it kind of makes sense to switch them, but I don't think it actually counterbalances the 8-11 switch. I think the 8-11 switch, which disables the ripple field, is better affected, is better just undone as Waite did. And if you want to switch, if you want to do an Athbash switch and switch Sadi and He, you can do that because they remain within. I mean, they are polar opposites. So Athbash basically is just flipping cards with their flipping letters with their polar mate, if you will. If you're familiar with the famous one is the word Baphomet can through Athbash be transformed into Sophia. Sophia and Baphomet are two words that by pivoting across the Hebrew alphabet, you can convert them into one another. So wisdom and the image of the corporeal, as above, so below, solve it, coagula, devil, quote unquote. So all very interesting stuff, but I decided on the basis of this analysis to go with the weight arrangement because it allows this ripple field to emerge, and I will make an analogy to again back to truing, but to the idea is that we're making a bell, and with the ripple field in place, it's like the tarot suddenly has the right balance where it will ring like a bell, and that ringing sound is the labyrinth. It's the concentric rings of the harmonious concentric rings that kind of spring out of the center, and in these four classes that I described, which have different functions and different densities. So If an energy is coming in towards the center, it's first going to encounter the domain circuit, which basically covers everything, and then pass through the flow circuits, which allow it to move, and then it'll hit the trial circuit, which will filter out certain, it'll filter out basically dissonances, and then it gets in further to the more flow circuit, and then another trial circuit will filter out the denser dissonances, and then it'll hit the art circuit, which is of course temperance and the chariot, which is a place of profound is a place of work and of alchemy and of profound transformation. It stands on its own, and then another flow circuit, and then another trial circuit, which is the hermit and the hangman, and then finally this inner ring, which is part of the flow circuit, but is the gateway to the heart of the tarot, as I said. So that's the ripple field, and that's the jewel, this bell-like quality that we get from the Rider-Waite arrangement. So I commend it to you to consider whether this is a feature that you want to be part of your tarot as you make it. Ultimately, I'm no longer of the mind that it has to be one or the other. I kind of see them all as superposed, but ultimately, I have found that this ripple field is how I parse the energy. So, for example, I'm not rejecting Crowleyan, Thelemic, Thoth deck stuff. I'm simply transforming it in this crucible, which is the labyrinth, and so I welcome it all. However, it is ultimately transformed by this armature, this toroidal armature at the very heart. And remember, I showed you the feather in the torus. So, whoo boy. Magical fields. That's what it also ultimately comes down to. Meta magic, if you want to call it. That is, it is a take on magic that allows us to say we are not falling back onto a pre-modern mode of magical thinking. We are incorporating the pre-modern and the post-modern, if you will. So the modern method is the modern scientific method is, in my opinion, married to the psychic economy of the heliocentric cosmology. So you can see guys like Descartes, Newton, and Giordano Bruno, who really birthed or fathered the modern science. They were heliocentrists. There was a shift into a heliocentric perspective. And it was interesting because they discovered, Copernicus, quote unquote, discovered heliocentricity by doing calculation, by figuring out it has to be the case that this set of dynamics is in play to create the appearance of the Ptolemaic cosmos, which supported magic and mysticism. And by discovering this mechanism that said, hold on, there's another mechanism that is giving us this appearance. It's almost like this seeing the apparatus behind the magic trick, seeing the method, the sleight of hand that produces a magical sleight of hand kind of prestidigitory effect. And the initial experience was of dispelling all previous magic. Says, oh, it was just a mechanism. Look, oh, rainbow looks magical, but actually it's just, light hitting, refracting. And there's this disenchantment that happens. And the modernist approach, the rationalist modernist approach, is very much this disenchantment, this negation, this dualistic negation of what happened before. Of course, since the early 20th century, there's been a move towards, you can call it postmodern, but really it is a step past this dualistic rejection of previous worlds and into this concept of integration. And I think that, you see a little bit of it in Crowley, you see a little bit of it in Birdsong, you see a little bit of it in Einstein, you see a little bit of it in the new physics and Schrodinger, and the work of Gebser, the work of Jean Gebser, who really laid out this idea of integrality of these different mutations, if you will. So we had the magical mutation, which is the compass rose. This is what I'm describing these. He had the magical mutation. I'd say that has everything to do with the compass rose. And then the mystical mutation, and that, to my mind, has everything to do with the Ptolemaic cosmos. The mental mutation, which I see as heliocentric, and then what comes after? Well, we know that the universe is not heliocentric. We know that we are on a galactocentric orbit, but even the galaxy is not the center of everything. So we're scaling beyond the sun at the center. There is talk of the dark sun, right? The center, the Sagittarius A, which could be seen as the feather of Ma'at, right? The pivot, the counterweight of the heart. And in that respect, you could see the Sagittarius A and the Sun as being like the scales of Ma'at. That's a very interesting meditation to consider. We are moving into a intensification of our experience, such that what we need to do is integrate the previous layers. Integrate the compass rose within the Ptolemaic cosmos, within the heliocentric cosmos, within the galactic cosmos. And that allows us to integrate magic at the heart of mysticism, at the heart of science, at the heart of integrality, and so on. And so all these layers become transparent, and then we have what I will call meta magic. There are a few things that I'd like to talk about before I conclude this video, and I think that's it. But let's just look at some of these pictures. So we have these lovely images. This is from the Tarot of the Holy Light. Again, hers is a different system. She's using 8 as justice. So be it. It's an interesting picture. She wants to construct a European continental tarot, a pre-English tarot. She feels that the Golden Dawn and the English magicians transformed the tarot too much. She's trying to recapture a continental esoteric tarot. Cool. I showed you mine. Benbow Wynn has the Chancellor, the Angel of Justice. I think that's an interesting card. Pretty traditional. She's put the Ankh there, which has a resonance with the Hanged Man. Here's an image of Justice with the yin and the yang, and also look, there's concentric circles around her halo. I love this early image of Justice that has a knight that's going forth, presumably to carry out the pronouncements. I feel that this Montian energy is very handy when we start to feel interconnected with everything. It's important to realize that, yes, the self is an illusion, but it's an illusion that we maintain in order to do our work. If anyone tells you that everything is everything and therefore they should have a piece of your energy, it's sometimes difficult when, it's sometimes difficult as we awaken to stave off vampires, because vampires are waiting for people who... Vampires are sort of pathetic, right? They play off pathetic pathos. And they're waiting for people to say, "Hey, oh, that's okay. I won't have boundaries because everything is everything." Don't think that because everything is everything that you don't have boundaries. Justice will let you establish those boundaries because your particular everything within the everything has work it needs to do, and so it needs to pass. It needs to be trued to its own contribution. And for that reason, without contradicting the total wholeness, we can defend ourselves, and even to the point of if we have to, lethal defense. we are not compelled by our spirituality to be bullied. And so justice is there to hold us. Now, that being said, if we put strength in the middle, we might end up being the bully. We don't want to be the bully. So this is but there's a defensive field here, and there is a sharp sword that will lance vampiric or parasitic incursions into the work. Here we have justice in the Rider-Waite, and the quite a topsy-turvy justice from the Blood and Ink, which is a really challenging deck, but I find it beautiful and aesthetic and raw, and it is a Marseille deck, so it is it is not emanating the Ripple field as such, but everything's welcome in the Crucible, and so this is definitely an image of the scales in intense motion and in dynamic. They haven't reached a stillness yet in this picture. The stillness is kind of the heart of the labyrinth. The stillness is the hole at the middle of the donut, which is also the periphery. The donut which can have its vector fields unified, the hairy donuts. And then here we have justice again as 8 in Leonora Carrington's work. So it opens quite a few avenues of exploration, all this discussion. But I would consider the passage through justice as a place of submitting ourselves to the lathe of heaven, to the balancing that is needed to experience the emptiness at the heart, the openness at the very center of the tarot, to which we do not append a symbol, but which we connect to. The tarot itself is now a bead through which a line of golden light can thread like a rosary in an act of balancing and restoration and tikkun. So thank you for joining me, and I hope this has been an interesting class. It's been about an hour now, so I'll let you go forth. But yeah, just consider how what we're doing here is really truing up our energy fields so that we can experience magic as a system of fields. I'll leave you with one last thing, because I left it out, is that this ultimately, the metamagic approach is approach of the generation of context-influencing fields. We can call them morphogenic fields. We can call them transformative fields. They're fields that are deployed by the use of language and by use of symbol and by their projection both in external and internal space. And so by learning this art, we use the tarot to deploy these fields, and they are influential of what occurs, of the way that becoming unfolds is influenced by the fields that are generated by magic words, such as the name Pallas Athena, who is a patron goddess of this path, this 11th path with her 11-letter name, which resonates with Abrahadabra, which is also an 11-letter field emanating formula. And I had a dream decades ago, and in that dream I was given a word, an acronym, and that acronym is SASSIFOI, and it stands for Spontaneously Appearing Self-Adjusting Fields of Influence. So in a way the tarot deploys or seeds sassafras into the experiential continuum. And as it does so, others are impacted by it. We're in a way creating resonance. And as we do that, it enables us to work, particularly these acts of tikkun, by which I mean repair, restoration, making transparent the fragmented opacities that keep it separate from one another. And performing these acts of repair is made possible by a saturation of the social space with ambient magical energies and symbols, which as magi we can interpret and deploy. So without further ado, I think I've given you guys a lot to think about. See you in the course. If you're not taking my course but you're watching this video, you might want to take my course. It is intensive and highly rewarding. My name is Dr. Peter Duchemin, and this is the Forest of Life Venus Calendar Week 21, The Path of Ethics. See you next time.